Hello, Panda Squad members. My name is Craig Smith. I'm the Senior Manager at WWF South Africa, and I'm here to talk to you about the fascinating subject of how sharks reproduce. I wonder if you ever asked yourself that question, how do they reproduce? Before we get into that interesting subject, let's contextualize how animals reproduce. And first of all, we take something that's very familiar to all of us, and that's mammals. Humans are part of the mammal category of animals, and mammals typically, they give birth to live young, and the babies look very similar to the adults, just smaller. And they typically will suckle, they will nurse on the mother, and the mother would need to fend and take care of the babies until the babies are old enough to take care for themselves. So that's mammals, and that's the way that they reproduce. If you look at another group of animals, let's take birds, for example. You're all familiar that birds lay eggs. They don't give birth to live young. And when the chicks hatch, they look totally different to their parents. Most birds are born without feathers, their eyes are closed, and the parents have to do quite a huge task in terms of taking care of the birds in terms of food and providing warmth. And if you look to another category of animals, the weird and bizarre marsupials, which includes your kangaroos, your wallabies, and the koala, these are a strange group of animals where the mother gives birth to a immature fetus, and the fetus then is left to develop in the mother's pouch. So that is outside of the mother, and the pregnancy continues there in terms of a full-term pregnancy. Here is a photo of a kangaroo mother with a baby joey in the pouch. So this is quite a bizarre way of reproduction, and it's unique to the marsupial group. So animals have various reproductive strategies or ways of reproducing to maximize their success of rearing the next generation. Sharks, however, take this to a whole new level. They deploy 3 different strategies, depending on which species you are looking at. So let's have a closer look at what sharks do in terms of reproduction. So the first group of sharks are called live-bearing sharks. They give birth to live young, and the scientific term for that is called viviparous. So most sharks actually give birth to live young. And the most advanced form of live bearing is where the little shark, the pup, is attached to the mother in the uterus via placenta and umbilical cord, something similar to mammals and humans. The fetus receives all its nutrients from the mother, and these sharks, which is the mother sharks, will seek out nursery areas where they will give birth to these sharks to maximize the survival of the pups. So typically the mom will go to sheltered bays or in mangroves, and that's where they will give birth. And the water is warmer, the water has lots of food, and also reduced number of predators. And this is favorable places for these sharks to give birth. The number of pups for these type of sharks varies from species to species, but typically between 2 to 100 pups can be born in a particular breeding season. And some species of shark that deploy this type of reproduction are bull sharks, lemon sharks, blue sharks, and hammerhead sharks. So some of the pictures that are put on the screen here for you, the top one is an ultrasound of a bull shark in its mother's uterus. So fully formed, swimming around in its mom's uterus, with the mom providing the protection for the pup. The bottom picture is of a mother lemon shark in a nursery area giving birth to a lemon shark. And you can see the pup swimming off, and attached to the pup is the umbilical cord. And as the shark swims off, that umbilical cord will be severed, and the shark will be basically then totally independent of its mom and to start its new life. Then we move to a second form of live bearing, and that is ovoviviparous. So ovo means egg, and although the sharks are born live, they start off as eggs inside the uterus. The mother retains these eggs in the uterus. It's a thin membrane around the embryo. Once the embryo hatches, the embryo then will feed off the yolk sac that is attached to the embryo for nourishment. It doesn't receive its nourishment directly from the mother. And as the yolk sac is depleted, these sharks can also turn on to feeding on unfertilized eggs in the mother's uterus. And if that is not bizarre, in some species like the ragged-tooth shark, the first embryos to hatch will then basically eat its siblings in the uterus, which only allows that particular species to give birth to 2 sharks per season. So gestation period for the sharks vary from 9 to 22 months, which is quite long. It's longer than typical humans. In some cases, like the basking shark, which is a very large species of shark, almost as large as a whale shark, the gestation period could be as long as 3.5 years. Can you imagine being pregnant for that length of time? Litter size for these shark species are very small, typically 2 to 30 pups. And some of the species that utilize this form of reproduction are great white sharks, short-fin mako, tiger sharks, basking, and ragged-tooth sharks. Some pictures for our interest. The top picture is a uterus that's been cut open, displaying all the pups inside a tiger shark. And you can see the baby tiger sharks and their yolk sacs still attached. And then the middle photo is one of a shark that's taken out of a uterus, but still its yolk sac attached. And then just to show you what an adult shark would look like, and this one is a photo of a short-fin mako shark, a very aggressive shark, open ocean shark that deploys this sort of reproduction strategy. Then finally, the third and last form of reproduction in sharks is egg laying or oviparous. So the minority of sharks use this form of reproduction, about 40% of the species. So of all the shark species, less than 200 species would use this form of reproduction. They're mainly restricted to small sharks that are bottom dwelling. And you'll see that basically when the sharks lay the eggs, the sharks or the embryos are encased in a tough leathery case and usually attached to objects such as sea fans, as well as algae by means of tendrils. And depending on the species, the mother shark can lay up to 20 or more eggs in a breeding season. The eggs typically hatch after about 4 to 6 months, and the sharks, as in all cases, the baby sharks are totally independent of its mother. There is no care given or provided by its mother. Egg cases can also be used to distinguish between different shark species, depending on the size of the egg case, the color of the egg case, and size, color, and shape. And then shark egg cases are also called mermaid purses, and they are commonly found washed up on beaches, which makes it quite a fun activity to do, which I'll explain to you in a little later, that you can engage in as a fun activity when you next visit the beach. So some of the photos here are quite fascinating. The top photo is of looking inside an egg case, and you'll see the baby shark. And attached to the baby shark, you'll see like an orange ball, which is the yolk sac. So the yolk sac that nourishes the shark, allows the shark to grow. And if you look very closely at the top photo, you will see there's a little slit at the top end, and that's a ventilation slit that allows for oxygenated water to flow in and deoxygenated water to flow out to allow the shark to breathe while it's growing inside the egg case. And when it's time to hatch, the top end of the egg case would split, and would then allow the juvenile shark to swim out freely. So that's by that second photo, you can see the egg case, the hatching slit has split, and the baby shark is free to swim out. The bottom set of photos is of a pajama shark or cat shark. It's a species that is endemic to South Africa, so it only is found here in South Africa. And it typically lays these kind of pearly white or slightly yellowish egg cases. In this case, it's attached to a sea fan, and you can see the tendrils nice and clearly how it's attached to the sea fan so that it doesn't get swept away by currents. And this is typically how these small sharks reproduce. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of these different types of reproduction? So for the larger pelagic sharks, pelagic is just sharks that swim in the open ocean or in the higher reaches of the water column, as opposed to bottom-dwelling sharks. Those sharks typically need to be on the move constantly. They need a high oxygen content in the water. Without that oxygen flowing over the gills, they will basically suffocate. So they can't bear egg cases. Those juvenile sharks will not survive in egg cases. So that reproduction strategy is not suitable for those larger sharks. But an advantage of giving live birth is that while the sharks are being developed in the mother's uterus, they not only receive the nourishment that comes from the mom, but they also receive the protection from the mother shark, so that they're not exposed to predators. The converse is true for the smaller sharks. The smaller sharks, they lay the eggs. It's unprotected, and it's open to predation by various animals, including whelks, octopus. They will all feed on these shark egg cases. So in that sense, those sharks lose out in terms of the predation. But where they gain is, you can imagine those small sharks don't have much space in the uterus to have all those eggs. So where they maximize, they're able to lay a large number of eggs for their size, even though a number of those shark eggs will not make it to hatching, as most of them will be eaten upon by various animals. So that's just to give an example of why different animals use different reproduction strategies in order to ensure that there's a good chance of success to rear the next generation. So coming back to a fun activity for you to do when you next visit the beach. So as I said, the bottom-dwelling sharks typically lay eggs, and the eggs are distinguishable between species. So when you go to the beach next time, walk slowly along the beach and examine what's been washed up on the shore. And you'll be amazed to see what different species of shark egg cases are found on the shore. So try to see which shark egg cases are deposited or washed up on the shore. And if you are of an inquiring mind, you can examine those egg cases to see if the sharks have hatched, whether the hatching slit has been opened. So if the hatching slit is open, that means the shark has hatched. But if the hatching slit is closed and the egg case is empty, it's a good chance that the embryo did not survive in the egg case. And then if you are really inquisitive, you can also then try to find out what species of sharks are living in that area, because each shark egg case is distinguishable according to species, to find out which species has laid that particular egg case. So some of the photos there are 3 different sharks laying different egg cases, and depending on which species they are, you'll get different species, different egg case shapes that will wash up on your beach. So that hopefully is a fun activity that you will pursue in your own time. And just a last parting message from me is that I'm hoping that this webinar has whet your appetite in terms of marveling at the wonder of nature, and also the importance of not just understanding nature, but also looking after and caring for nature. And thank you for your attention. Cheers. That's it.